Hello everybody, in today's video we are going to be talking about your third Atlantic hurricane season forecast for the year of 2020. We're going to be going over your sea surface temperature anomaly map as well as your wind shear forecast, and then I'm going to be going over my overall forecast and how many named storms I expect, how many hurricanes I expect, and how many major hurricanes I expect this Atlantic hurricane season. So I'm going to be giving you my complete updated forecast for the Atlantic hurricane season. I'm just updating this mainly because there has been a lot that has changed within the past few weeks since I last made my second Atlantic hurricane season forecast. So let's get right into it here with your sea surface temperature anomaly map. Now, over much of the Atlantic, we have above average sea surface temperatures, and that's mainly just due to how warm it has been over the Atlantic. If you look at a map of the current sea surface temperatures, it is well above average, and there are some pockets that are below average, but that's mainly just due to storms that went through those areas and upwelled some cooler water, but eventually those will go back to above normal. So we have a very favorable pattern in the Atlantic for warmer than normal sea surface temperatures and also some lesser wind shear, which we'll talk about in just one moment. Now, here is your next layer here, and this is your moderately above average layer, and this is where it's going to be a little bit more above average than these areas in the yellow, and this includes areas off the east coast as well as areas in the western and central Caribbean, and also for all of the Gulf of Mexico there. These areas have been especially above average this hurricane season so far and look to continue that trend and stay even more above average. Now, here is your third and final layer for your sea surface temperatures, and this is your well above average region. This is where it's going to be extremely noticeable, especially as you look at some sea surface temperature maps. You're going to really see those dark reds start to show up, especially as we get into September and October. It really looks like this area is going to be primed for quite a bit of activity for the northern and central Gulf of Mexico, as well as the areas off the East Coast up until New England there. That's where I am expecting some well above average sea surface temperatures. Now, let's start looking at your wind shear map and forecast and whether you're going to see more or less wind shear in the Atlantic. Now, here is the above average wind shear region, and this is less favorable for storms to really develop, and that is going to be over the northern Atlantic, over parts of areas from the mid Atlantic and northeast, as well as southeastern Canada and eastward, basically. This is where we're looking at more wind shear than normal. The more wind shear you have, the less favorable the conditions, the less wind shear, the more favorable the conditions are over the northern Atlantic. That's mainly just because of the jet stream, especially into September and October, that I think is going to dip down lower than normal. And the jet stream provides a lot of wind shear, and that'll extend off into the Atlantic. And I think that will provide quite a bit of wind shear. So that's mainly the reason I'm putting slightly above average wind shear in these regions. Although it's not going to be too noticeable, and you can still have storms move up here and still survive a little bit because the wind shear will take a little bit of time to really work on the storms. Now, here is your slightly below average region, and this is for pretty much anywhere south of South Carolina and Georgia, and then basically draw a line eastward, and anywhere south of there is in below average wind shear. Now, this is your first layer. This is slightly below average, and now we're going to add your next layer, moderately below average, for parts of the western Gulf of Mexico, and also for parts of the southern Caribbean, the Lesser Antilles, and anywhere eastward all the way until you hit Africa. Now, here's why I'm expecting well below average wind shear, and this is where it's going to be extremely favorable, and that is going to be south of the Dominican Republic and Haiti, as well as Puerto Rico. South of there, all the way until you hit northern South America, is where I'm expecting or well below average wind shear for these regions. Now, this, even though you do have a well below average wind shear, most of the wind shear this season has been to the north of the Caribbean. But just because you have well below average wind shear, I don't think this area is going to be the most favorable. Just because you are going to see quite a bit of land masses just converging through here, so you have to get a pretty perfect storm track to not really impact any land masses and to not weaken too much. So although you might not have wind shear in these regions, you will still have the land masses to contend with. Now, here is the overall forecast, and we're going to get into what I expect on average for this hurricane season. So, east of pretty much all the Caribbean islands and the Lesser Antilles, I am expecting a warmer and more active hurricane season in these regions. This is where I'm expecting a lot of storms to get just to kind of just organize, and then once they move into the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, the East Coast, that's where they'll really start to get going. But I do think you're gonna have a lot of storms move through here. You're gonna have a warmer and more active area here. You have warmer sea surface temperatures. You have less wind shear than normal due to the La Nina Enso pattern that we are in. So that really brings your wind shear down, and that looks to really help these storms develop. We already have a couple of areas of interest off the Africa coast, and that looks to kind of be a trend where you get a lot of tropical waves to move off. And more likely than not, most of these tropical waves end up developing into something this year just because of how warm these sea surface temperatures are, and they can really get going, especially with the lack of wind shear in the Atlantic. Now, here is the strengthening zone, and this is really where not a lot of storms are going to make landfall or become major hurricanes through here, but I think they're going to go from tropical depression, tropical wave to some sort of bigger tropical storm, and then they'll head somewhere into the East Coast or the Gulf of Mexico. So this is the area where these storms are really going to strengthen before heading into wherever they're going to make landfall. So in the Gulf of Mexico, off the East Coast, wherever they're going to make landfall, this is where they're going to start strengthening from whatever they were before, a tropical wave, tropical depression, into some sort of tropical storm, maybe even a hurricane in these regions. So that's why I called it the strengthening zone. Now, here is in the Gulf of Mexico, many big storms. We've already seen, I believe, two hurricanes, actually three hurricanes move throughout the Gulf of Mexico, and we look to continue that. We have very warm waters, and we also have a lot of ocean heat content that's just been stored up. A major hurricane Laura did kind of upwell some of that heat content, but that will still kind of rebuild, and you will be able to get a lot more big storms move through here. And once they move out of the Caribbean and they start to head into the Gulf of Mexico, they're really going to start to strengthen into potentially hurricanes, high-end tropical storms, or maybe even major hurricanes, depending on how strong these storms can get. Now, here off the East Coast, this is where I'm expecting one or two more storms, and I'm talking about tropical storms or maybe even low-end hurricanes. We've already seen about two of these, and maybe a couple more move through up the East Coast, but I think you will see probably one or two more. Whether they make impact with the East Coast, that's still to be seen, and that's more of a short-term thing. But I do think you'll see one or two maybe near misses or potential impacts off the East Coast in the form of a tropical storm, maybe a low-end hurricane, kind of like what we saw with Faye or Isaias in the past over the Atlantic hurricane season. That's what I really think is going to happen. We're probably going to just see one or two more of these storms. I don't think it's going to be very numerous off the East Coast, and I think it's going to start to die down as the waters start to cool off the northeast and mid-Atlantic coast. As we get into September and October, those waters are really going to lower in temperature. Now, let's start talking about how many storms I expect. I'm expecting 22 to 26 named storms there, and that is just because of how active the season has been. We've seen a lot of tropical storms. Oh, and by the way, this is actually from what we've already seen. So this is adding on to what we've already seen. So I believe we've already seen 13 storms, I do believe. So this is added on to that. I'm expecting a total of 22 to 26 named storms. Hurricanes, I'm expecting 5 to 9 of those, and that's mainly just because it probably would be higher, but just a trend that we've seen in this hurricane season is that most of these storms are very weak tropical storms that kind of just move off the Africa coast, develop into something very weak, and then just move out. To see only a few of these storms so far have actually become hurricanes, and that's why I only put 5 to 9. This could definitely go up, and that would still be above average for the season. We're on pace with the 2005 hurricane season, which was the most active, and it looks like we're going to sustain that pace. And major hurricanes, I'm expecting 2 to 4. We've already seen one major hurricane, so at least another one should be expected. And whether that makes landfall or not, that's really still something that we cannot predict. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.